they all connect, how they all basically work together for the overall cannabis ecosystem. Next slide. Okay, if you look at this infographic here, now granted, this is from a few years ago, and it was projecting out to 2023, 2025 and beyond, okay? But this is from 2018. And if you're looking at this end at the bottom of the page, it's talking about, you know, the medical cannabis market back then was 4.75 billion. You know, the recreational market was 6 billion, and that was projected to grow. And this was not necessarily for, you know, all of Virginia. This is for, you know, large markets, as you can see on that map. Well, that has changed to where, you know, from the Zoom that I was on last year with the state, I believe the gentleman from the state police said that they know that in the legacy market, you'll hear us refer to that today. The legacy market is the politically correct term for the illegal cannabis industry, because we don't want to say black market, and we don't want to go around saying illicit market when we're trying to empower people, because some people won't understand that conversation. But in the legacy market, last year, it was a $3.1 billion industry in the state of Virginia. So the projections that they had here, you can go to the next slide. The projections that they had here were way low for how things are really going. Now, what you're looking at here, this infographic is something that we created to describe and explain the supply chain of cannabis. And I'm going to walk you through this so that you have an understanding about all these different pieces and how they connect. Now, I could sit here and talk to you about this one page for 4 hours, but we're not going to do that today. I only have so much time, and I want to just talk about this from a helicopter view to explain how the pieces connect, because over the course of the day, we will end up talking more detail about some of these different parts of the business. But also coming up in the coming weeks, we'll be starting a series of podcasts for our members, as well as trainings for our members. And we'll go way more in depth in this as an opportunity in terms of how to tap into these different things, because I just don't have the time to go into all the granular details on that today. So let's start in the top left corner, right underneath our logo there. You see cultivation, greenhouse, indoor, outdoor, flower, biomass. Regardless of how people want to grow, this is where the industry starts, the plant, actually growing the plant. You can't have a dispensary. You can't have, you know, an edible company. You don't have anything to deliver if the plant never grows. But I want you to understand, with cultivation, it is an opportunity for people that really get it. And when I say get it, they understand going in that cultivation is about farming. It is about work. And some of the people that I've talked to over the last year interested in, you know, becoming a cultivator, wanting to do those kinds of things, they ended up thinking that, hey, this is going to be like growing a couple personal grow plants. I come in, you know, do what I need to do. But if I want to go on vacation for a few weeks, I can do that. No, when we're talking about cultivation, you have a commitment to the plants, because you have to understand you have investor money tied into those plants. Cultivation is one of the most expensive parts of the industry to enter into, depending on how you want to grow, whether that's indoor or outdoor. And if you choose outdoor versus indoor, depending on where you live and where you're located and the weather and the climate, there's some things that you can't grow, some things that you can. Some product that will turn into flower and bud that ends up in a dispensary, and other product that'll end up being broken down and turned into manufacturing products for edibles, because it's not fit to be sold as smokable flower. But that's something that, like I said, we get more in depth in our boot camps and things. But understand, with cultivation, that kicks everything off, because when you're the cultivator, understand that you have to do things completely different than you have in the legacy market. And we actually have a video series that we'll be launching. And one of the videos is called Going from the Legacy to Legit Market in a Year. And when we put that out on our YouTube channel, I encourage you to take a look at that, because it'll have several steps that can be very impactful for someone looking to do that. But understand here that when we're talking about cultivation, I'm going to talk about from the above board legit side of the business, even though we'll reference the legacy market at different times. Now, once the product is actually grown, it's been tested, and you see these arrows, the product cannot move to the next spot in this infographic without testing. Testing takes place all through the cultivation process. The way you have to view this is that you're now growing medicine. You're growing medicine. Like if somebody could grow heart medication or insulin for diabetics and they could do it at home, don't you think the government would have some sort of concern about how you grow, what you use, how you actually turn the plant into a consumable product? They would want to know that. For those pills, same thing applies to cannabis. You need to view this as medicine, not weed. If your view of this industry stops at weed, you are selling yourself short, and you're going to create some issues because you're going to underestimate the commitment and everything that's involved. So once the product leaves the cultivation facility, it can go to a manufacturer. And that manufacturer is where you get your edibles, whether we're talking about chewables, whether we're talking about gummies, cookies, chocolates, any of those different things. If you want it to be a edible manufacturer, that would require a license, and most cannabis municipalities that have recreational and medical, you have to actually have a license for that. Why? Because you are working with medicine. And granted, some of you are saying no one's ever, passed out, OD'd or anything from cannabis, which is true. However, it is medicine. If you want to not be harassed by the police, you have to treat the industry like it's a reputable professional industry. And in manufacturing is one of the biggest areas I see people in the community with they got a really mixed up mind on what's going on. They view, hey, I bake cookies, I bake cupcakes, I make this item, this product really, really well. I just took the cookies that I make and I combined it with weed that I got from my friend. And now I want to get into the edible business. And they go around selling cookies and all that stuff. And they think, yeah, I'm making some hundreds of dollars. This is great. I need to do this as a business. That's awesome. But understand, doing that, you're functioning in the legacy market. If you were to get clipped, you are going to jail, regardless of how you want to play it out, because you're functioning outside of a licensing structure. So be careful. Now, I will tell you, making edibles for yourself is not against the law. And we'll talk more about that later on. But understand, with manufacturing, there's different ways that you can enter into it, but depending on what you want to do, manufacturing can be expensive also, because sometimes it requires some scientific oversight. When you're talking about working with the butanes and the different extraction processes, if you want to be extracting all together and making the actual product, that's licensing. Now, doesn't necessarily, not everyone in every state has had the same structure. It's been different from state to state, but that's why it's so impactful and so important for us as citizens wanting to participate in this industry to be politically involved, because all those rules and things that I'm referencing are not framed up yet, and you can help influence and impact those so you don't get screwed out of the opportunity on the back end of this. So next thing you see, the arrow goes to distribution. Now, in this model, we're talking about distribution like some states have set up, where you have a business, a company that actually provides the cannabis supply to all the different retail stores. In some places, the distributor has a territory. In some places, the distributor can compete against everyone all across the state, which means they have to be good at business. Now, in the state of Virginia, for example, I'm going to use alcohol. The state of Virginia has the ABC store. The state of Virginia controls the distribution of alcohol in the state. It all moves through the state's warehouse system. Now, there's some people that advocate for that same type of process and system being set up in Virginia for cannabis. We do not like that idea, and the state does not like that idea. From being on the Zooms that I was on when we were working on the first half of the legalization process, the ABC department numerous times that they don't want any parts of having to regulate and manage cannabis, because they were struggling to manage and oversee alcohol. So the reason I'm talking about this is so if you're ever involved with us politically and you should happen to hear someone talking about why we need to have distributors and why distribution needs to be set up, what that means is they probably have a tie to some deep corporate pockets on a significant 9-figure level. I'm talking about like Jack Daniels, Walmart. Companies like this have wanted to get into cannabis distribution and other markets. Why? Picture a building about 4 times the size of a Costco, and it's filled with cannabis product, all the different types of cannabis products that would be sold in dispensaries. That's where it gets stored. It's a very secure facility. And then the other side of the facility has cash, tons and tons of cash, because in the cannabis industry, you can't use a bank. So the distributor will deal with collecting the taxes on the products sold to retailers, and then they will provide retailers with product. In the state of Virginia, we do not like that. VMCC does not like that because that's adding a middleman to this business process. If there's no distributor in this process, that allows the cultivator to negotiate and basically do business directly with the retailer. Now, everything gets tracked. There is not a plant that you will ever put in the soil that is not accounted for. That understand that is how tightly managed cannabis is. When you start having missing plants that aren't accounting for, you start getting hit with fees and penalties until they take your license away, which does happen. But in this example, the distributor has all this cannabis product in this building and they have stores that they deal with. But let's say that's your distributor and your competitor that's 3 or 4 blocks up the street from you has a relationship with that distributor. And that's also your distributor. And they have a product that your customers love, but that distributor decides that they're not going to sell you that product because they're sending that product to their friend who is your competitor. Now, is that fair? No. Is it professional? No. Does it happen? Yes. That same thing happens in all types of industries when there's distribution and it's controlled in that level. That's why we don't like that, because it's just adding another hand in your pocket. And we want to help people learn how to negotiate and set up a free market system across the state so everyone has an opportunity to do well. Basically, if you're good in business, you should thrive and do better than surviving. But if you suck at business, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what color you are going to struggle as a business. VMCC is focused on, first things first, teaching you how to run a solid business. That is so important. I cannot stress how important that is, but you will hear from some of the people over the course of the day, which I think will give you some perspective of just how real this is. So moving on from the distributor, when we're talking about delivery here, you know, some places that have distribution, you got to have people, or you have to have subcontractors that deliver product to dispensaries in areas that are hard to reach or that are off the main route, depending on how they're set up. Why is that? Because the truck is driving around with a product that people will steal, and people will basically do harm to people to try and acquire. So it's still part of the country. Cannabis is not legal, so some people still treat it like it is an illicit thing. So understand that that's the delivery we're talking about here. And in different municipalities, there's different variations of delivery programs. In some places, if you have an account set up with your retailer, and we're going to talk about that next, the retailer, you can purchase your cannabis online, pay for it, and then the delivery company comes and picks it up like Grubhub and brings it to you. It was, in some markets, they created this for seniors because a lot of people didn't like driving in the evening to pick up their medicine. And, you know, as the seasons change, it gets darker early and all those kinds of things. But before we go to retail, because that's what everyone is always interested in, let's just talk about testing. Understand that testing is key in every part of this industry. The product does not move without being tested, whether that is testing a plant before you can sell it, pounds of it for people to pack in a bowl and sell, or excuse me, to smoke, or whether you're talking about you just made some cookies, some gummies, some cupcakes. All of those things have to be tested before consumers can actually get them, because it is medicine. And if you see that dotted line right there under delivery, the reason that's different is because medical dispensaries function in a completely different business environment than what we're talking about here for adult use. In the state of Virginia, the medical MSOs, the multi-state operators, have to do everything on this page that you see themselves under one roof. That is why becoming a medical MSO in the state and in other states requires so much money, because they require you to have all of these different things except for testing done under your roof. Now, as the industry has evolved in other places, that has evolved to where some places allow craft growing, which VMCC is very pro on. There's a lot of different permutations of this basic ecosystem here, this cannabis supply chain. And in our boot camps and other things, we talk a lot more in depth about that, but we want you to just understand how these key things go. Now, with testing, you see that red arrow there going to product disposal. This right here is very key, okay? In the legal cannabis market, when you have a crop that grows, comes to harvest, it gets tested, it's got too much mold, the THC content isn't what you said it originally was. If there are any discrepancies, that product must be destroyed. You can't take it and go sell it to your boy out the back door. You can't take it and go consume it yourself thinking nobody will notice. It must be destroyed. Now, those of you that don't believe me, okay, I said it must. I didn't say it always does. You have some people that will always try to escape the system. But understand, I don't know about other states, but you best believe here in the state of Virginia, you will be made an example of trying to divert and work outside of this process. If they are going to go through this process and legalize something and allow people to tap into it as an economic engine, you best believe they're going to use a lot of people as examples that don't do the system the way it's set up. Now, last thing I want to say about these products, if you have ever purchased product in some of the pop-up shops in DC, or if you have purchased product here locally, from whatever means. If you look on the back of the packaging, you see a CA in a circle. That product means, first of all, it wasn't grown here, or didn't come from here. It came from another place, and that CA stands for California. And a lot of that product that ends up in the South and ends up here on the East Coast is because people did not dispose of the product. Some people overgrow intentionally and then try to divert part of the product. And that has created enormous problems for the state of California. It has created enormous financial loss for Black people in the state of California who are trying to go legit, because it always holds up the industry. And you'll hear more about that over the course of the day. But understand, there's a reason that we call this a system, because it is truly that. It is just like the human body. There's 8 systems in the human body. If you take out the pulmonary system, you will not live very long. If you take out the cardiac system, you will not live very long. All of these things must coexist in order for there to be a solid industry that people can tap into without unnecessary hassle. Now, let's talk about the last thing all the way on the right as we finish up here and get ready for earnest. These 3 things, those 2 things, consumption lounge and retail store, are the 2 things I get asked about the most. Now, understand, in the retail store, that's typically at the front end of an industry opening up. The retail stores are on the back end of that front end, meaning the cultivators open up first, so they create a product that you actually can get through manufacturing, get it tested, so the retail store actually has something to sell, because you can't bring product from outside the state. So there's a lot of different ways that there's proposals to try and satisfy the market need, and we'll talk more about that down the road. But I want you to understand, when it comes to retail, it is the most heavily taxed part of the industry. In some places, people get taxed at about 43%. Okay, so if you're looking at $1, 43 cents out of that dollar is saying, hello, Mr. Taxman. And that's where that money is going. In some areas that have opened up for cannabis, where the state let the local municipalities set up their own structure, the entrepreneurs get overtaxed in so many ways. And this is something that can be prevented here in Virginia by all of you understanding this and getting on your politicians' ass about setting up this structure correctly, because overtaxing this industry creates an opportunity for the legacy market to continue to grow and prosper. Why are we not happy with that? Because typically the people that are supplying the product in the legacy market as a supplier don't look like me, but the people that get arrested always look like me. So that's a problem here, okay? So understand, when it comes to retail though, this is what everybody loves. People walk into the store, regardless of if you're doing a higher end spa-like environment in your dispensary, or whether you're doing something very earthy, whether you're doing something very simple and cool with colors and motion and things like that. I've been in a lot of dispensaries around the country. People do them a lot of different ways. But understand, if you're just thinking, I'm going to go get me a storefront down the street here, and then we'll put a sign up, and then we'll get some weed wherever you get the weed from, and everybody's going to come buy from us. That is very naive. That is not how it really works. And you got to put a lot more thought into that, particularly drilling down to who's your core customer. Now, consumption lounges, that is something that I have started to get a lot of questions about. I have some boot campers that have been interested in consumption lounges. Understand, consumption lounges are not dispensaries. Consumption lounges are that. You bring product to that facility to consume. That facility does not sell product because it is not a dispensary. Now, you can own a dispensary and right next to it have a consumption lounge, and people can go in your dispensary during business hours and walk into your consumption lounge and consume the product without having to go home. That is an opportunity in many places. Now, in the state of Virginia, that has not been completely factored in. It's something that actually started to become an interest to people and started to come up at the end of that legislative session. And so it is something that will continue to be factored in, but I want you all to understand, going for a consumption lounge is not the same as going for a dispensary. Going for a dispensary means that you are actually going to sell cannabis product. You are going to be regulated. You are going to deal with inspectors. You are going to deal with accountability for the inventory. The consumption lounge makes money selling food and other things to people. Some consumption lounges around the country will not allow you to serve alcohol also. So you have to decide if that's what you're interested in. You have to decide how you want to try and enter the market. And as I close here, as we get ready for earnest, I want to talk about what you see on this screen. Understand that each one of these things, these boxes you see on this screen, are a top tier business in the cannabis industry. And when I say top tier, what I mean is those are the businesses that everybody's shooting for, that are known, that they know about. But I want you to understand that there's many other opportunities beneath that. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, we remove back up one for me. There you go. Thank you. Underneath this heading, all these bullet points are other businesses. Some of them are repetitive, where you'll be able to deal with multiple people in this industry. But if you look at this, these are all businesses that are needed in the coming cannabis industry that people don't ever ask about. These businesses don't require millions of dollars. The average dispensary across the country has a capital commitment of $750,000. The average cultivation farm or indoor grow has a capital requirement of about $2 million. Now, that's not you having to have $2 million. That's you putting together the business plan and everything to attract the investor that wrote you a check. You understand? So if dealing with all of that is not something that you're interested in, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity outside of the only things that you see on the news. And stop looking to the news for your cannabis information. Come to VMCC, because In the news, you don't learn about these ancillary businesses where many of them you can run out of a storage facility, your garage, or a strip mall storefront, where you don't have nearly the capital requirements, having to put your house up and all those other kinds of things, but can make a significant six-figure income. I've met some people that specialize in lighting, in cultivation for indoor grow, and that's very popular in the Southwest and out West. And the gentleman I made was just a regular electrician. He got certified in the lighting and the highly dangerous lighting that insurance companies don't like in the cannabis industry. And he got certified to install them. And he ended up being one of the first people in like half the state. And as a result, after about 3 years, he didn't do other electrical work anymore because that became what he was known for. And now that gentleman has about 11 or 12 trucks running across the area. So understand that there's tremendous opportunity. Next slide. Even in these, understand that there's different things. People overlook security and transportation, storing the cash, all of those different things because you can't use a bank. But in this other category, delivery services, accounting. When it comes to retail, those of you interested in getting a dispensary, research tax law 280E. If you research that, you will learn that as a business owner in cannabis, you don't get to write off any of the things you can typically write off in any other business. That's one of the reasons why, as a cannabis entrepreneur, you must always stay politically involved to keep the pressure on the politicians to make this a beneficial situation for all entrepreneurs. Real estate, there's a lot of different ways people function in real estate and cannabis. Going up and trying to corner the market on the real estate is asinine. I know people that have lost millions of dollars holding property for the big day when everybody wants to come get in and they're going to come to them, and then zoning change, and now they own buildings and have built millions of square feet of space that they can't rent, can't lease to anybody because it's out in the middle of nowhere, and they're on the hook for that debt. And if you didn't know, debt is dumb. Consumption lounges, we talked about that, and promoting cannabis events. If you've noticed that there's a lot of cannabis events that are starting to pop up, next slide. And there's a market for people to help that. And this right here shows job growth. If you look at the job growth, and I'm talking just jobs, not owning a business, just jobs. The starting pay nationally in cannabis across the country is about $17.23 an hour to start for a kid coming out of high school, getting a graduation and going to a facility where he's working somewhere, not touching a plant. In Virginia, the average is about $15.50 for starting pay, working for the companies here in the state that are legally functioning. That's great pay for somebody 19 living at their mom's house. That's a livable wage of $31,000 a year without having to go to college, go in debt, and they're actually doing something they have an interest and passion for. Next slide. Time is running out, y'all. And you're going to hear me say this a lot today. But when I'm talking about the time is running out, it's because, one, we have another election coming up in the state. We have a presidential election that can end up impacting cannabis. We have a law process that is not finished, that is currently in play, that many citizens need to pay attention to so they don't get counted out of the industry. It's not a 5-year window of time. It's not 10 years and then we can get into it. We're talking about a window of time of 8